everyone, it's Mark Bayer, and you are tuned to When Science Speaks. This episode of the show is sponsored by the One for the Week newsletter. One for the Week is a free weekly newsletter delivering to your inbox one resource related to presentation skills, writing, or persuasion that can be applied right away to boost your effectiveness on campus, the corridors of power when talking to policymakers, and across the corporate landscape. Interested in getting free insights in your inbox to achieve your goals? Just go to onefortheweek.com to get the resources for moving up. It is so great to have Jordan Cutler on the show today. Jordan is the author of the High Growth Engineer newsletter, arriving Sundays in the inboxes of 50,000 plus subscribers and counting. He's also a sought after course instructor and a full time senior software engineer. Jordan has a special knack for helping engineers achieve their professional goals by building and broadening real world skills before and during the job search, getting your resume to stand out, landing your dream job, getting promoted faster, and much, much more. Jordan earned his bachelor's in computer science from Lehigh University, and it's just fantastic to have you joining us. Thanks so much, Jordan.
Thanks so much, Mark. So happy to be here and gonna love chatting with you.
In your High Growth Engineer newsletter, and of course, we'll have a link to how to sign up and subscribe to it. In your newsletter, you write in an accessible, engaging style that non engineers like myself can follow and really enjoy. At the same time, it's clear from your writing and professional background that you really know your engineering down to the very fine details. Many of us may be highly skilled in a STEM field or in the humanities, but you really seem to have both sides of the brain, so to speak, like running in high gear, which is rare. And so I'm wondering, to start off, if you could share with listeners, growing up, were you interested in writing and computing? Or how do you think it happened that you have such strong skills in both of these worlds?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess to start, I just want to say that I definitely was not born with both of these. I think up till maybe about, I guess, the last couple years, really, I thought that I was terrible at writing and I hated writing all throughout school. I hated how they had these minimum page requirements, these exact structure of how you need to put together your paragraphs and your thesis statement at the end and all this stuff there and writing about topics that you didn't really like and all that stuff deterred me away from liking writing. I definitely liked math a lot more. It was a lot more just like, hey, do this problem. And writing was like an art as well. And so it's a lot really tricky to get right. One thing too is that I think I'm good at one type of writing, but I still need to build in other types of writing as well. You can, in the same way that for technical skills, just because you're good at, let's say, algebra doesn't mean that you might be great at geometry. You might still need to master some things there. So anyways, I think really the root of it comes down to opening yourself up to realizing that it's something that you can get better at. And that's what happened for me because I wanted to essentially get better at sharing what I know and trying to help others grow. And I read this book called Smart Brevity. It was, yeah, I talk about it all the time. And essentially the core idea that it just hammers in over and over again is think about your audience. What do they care about? Tell them why they should care about it. Give them the info and then tell them what you just told them. And that has literally been the format of my newsletter. I just took that same formula. I said, hey, I have my first little blurb here, which is what am I going to talk about today and why does it matter? Then I'm going to tell you all those topics. And then at the very end, I'm just going to recap it. And then what I try to do after I finish maybe writing my article is I just try to delete as much as I can. If something isn't adding value, then I just delete it. And I just do that over and over again until it gets to a thing that you see and you feel like it's approachable to anyone and you feel like you're progressing as you read it and all that. You feel, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to learn. Okay, now I'm getting to the part that he told me I was going to get to. And now after I get that, oh, this is a recap. This is what I just need to remember now that I enjoyed reading these little parts here. So yeah, that's how I got into it and started developing that skill and doing that for a year. And every single article, I feel like I get better.
I love that story for so many reasons. One, just being this growth mindset. And then you had maybe an engineer's mind is, well, okay, I want this. So how do I set about doing it? I met Mike Allen. I interacted with him for during my Capitol Hill days. Really super smart guy, Jim Vandehei. I have, of course, I have the book too. And yeah, and it's that whittling
Oh, the
away to
authors of
kind of approach. It's all about relevance initially. And I see this all even in storytelling, you gotta lead with it seems weird sometimes. I'm gonna start with a punchline and then do the setup, and then you'll get it. I'll do the punchline again, but maybe a little different, like, yeah, just how you decided this is something that I'm not naturally, like, just born with, like you said, and I want to add it to my skill set. And you figure out a way to do it, and you're doing it so well, and you're iterating too, which is maybe that comes partly from your engineering thinking too. You write a lot about the need for communication skills and emotional intelligence in the workplace. And I wonder if, just generally speaking, if you think engineers undervalue the importance of these essential skills at all.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thought that came to mind is that it's tied back actually to some of the stuff we were just talking about in a way, in that I don't think they undervalue it. I think a lot of times they do see the value of it. You see sometimes people make these posts where it's like, oh, this extrovert is getting all the credit for all these things. And they view it in that nature of this extrovert person knows how to communicate. And so they get the credit on these things and maybe they shouldn't have or something like that. But you can also have both too. You can have both. And I think a lot of engineers, they might potentially put themselves in this bucket where they feel like the thing that they're good at is the technical thing. And they're just going to keep getting better at that because they feel like that's their strength, right? And they don't realize that you can get better at another skill too, communication, figuring out how to communicate your technical ideas and getting the benefits of that. You can be that person that you're sometimes a little like judgmental about of, oh, this person here is getting all the credit. And maybe there are definitely, I will say there's definitely some people that get the credit and they don't deserve it, but you could be one of the ones that get the credit and you do deserve it. Don't be one of the ones where you do deserve the credit, but you don't get it because you don't know how to communicate it. So I think it's just a matter of shifting your mindset to understanding that you can grow in that area and trying to figure out what are the steps to start doing that. And really it doesn't get more straightforward than just practice. Before you hit send on that message, what you should do is ask yourself, is what am I trying to accomplish with this message? And is this the best way that I should be sending this exact wording of how I'm approaching it, all those things? And there are a couple tricks of the trade as well. One, for example, that you might use your probably bottom line up front. And I love that one. It's essentially you start with the main takeaway point and then you give context afterwards. And I feel like that was a huge mindset shift and a light bulb moment for me as a technical person where you often start with, hey, here's a lot of data on something. And then here's what I think is the result of that data. But really, like business people, they don't care, unfortunately, about that. They want to know what is the thing that you recommend and then why do you recommend it? And start with that generally, I'd say a lot of the time. And so that's been a huge game changer for me learning that one, which I think I learned that one from Smart Brevity. It's
So funny because yesterday I just finished up the latest cohort of my online class about how to effectively communicate complexity. And I talked a lot about this and leading with the punchline and so forth. And I can completely understand, particularly for scientists, engineers, to want to proceed in their communication in a logical, linear fashion. One thing leads to the next, leads to the next, until there is some like QED, therefore this. But of course, the therefore this is the one thing that your people, your listeners care about. So
yeah.
they don't stick around for all those things. I just tell this brief story about how it's like my wife when she says, "Can you clean the kitchen?" So I go in there and the place is a complete mess, and the kids haven't put away the dishes and they've left the towels. And they didn't wipe down the counter, even though I've asked them to do that like 20 times. So I come back to her and I'm like, "You won't believe this. I had to do all these things because she just wants to know, like, is the kitchen clean?"
Exactly, yep.
But I feel a need to share, like, the blood, sweat, and tears, like, all these process steps, right?
Yeah,
Which are completely invisible to her, and irrelevant to her. So
exactly.
we all battle this, but you can, as you point out, you can cure yourself of this as well. You've implied and talked a little bit about this next question, which is, was there a moment when you realized, "I gotta get smart brevity," or, "I've gotta get smarter on this?" Did something specifically happen, or maybe been, like, in the background of your thinking for a while, like, "I really should this or that," and then you saw, "Oh, there's this new book, and I could read this book and get exactly what I need."
Yeah, definitely. So I think the smart brevity came from me wanting to improve my writing online because I was sharing what I knew and just how can I do that in a better way. Went on Amazon and just searched writing books, and I think it was one of the ones there. And I think that one stood out because something that I always had trouble doing was being concise. And the smart brevity tagline, it made more sense to me because it was like, how can you be concise without being too concise? It's like you're smartly being concise, if that made sense. Like you're doing it in a smart way. Um, so I think that was part of it, but then that's more on the writing side. I think there was also the just overall soft skill understanding that, hey, I need to grow in these skills if I'm going to be better. I think there's a couple things that factored into that. There were a couple points in my career where I had to take a serious look at reflection of, hey, where did this thing go wrong? And one example was I didn't get my Twitter internship return offer, even though I had interned there once, got a return offer. So you would think that on the second internship, it's like, oh yeah, got it in the bag. And nope, that was not the case. And when I think back to some of the reasons there, I was actually probably too focused on trying to get the technical things done and not focused enough on being a solid core member of the team and someone that people felt like was there. They wanted to work with, they wanted to rehire type of thing. So that was like one of the experiences where I started this journey lately. And then over time, I started to have similar experiences. Normally, my managers would give me feedback more on my soft skill, way that I can improve those rather than the technical ones. They were always in a good state. So I just would keep trying to improve those. And I know there's a lot of different areas within that, like giving feedback, receiving feedback, writing your performance review, doing a presentation, all those things. It's almost like an art form in a way where you can just constantly get better at it. There's a very like high skill ceiling. And that's one of the things that I really like as well is that you could just constantly get better at it and figure out how to navigate all these different situations. So yeah, it's a overtime thing. Definitely some hard earned experiences of that I should focus on it.
I'm gonna ask you more about that too, because I just think it's really courageous and amazing that you share those so openly with your readership, with your big following. I like how you're talking about writing as artistry and like communication as artistry as more of an art. And it's funny to me because oftentimes we think of like science and art, like they're two separate things. So a few years ago, I was like, I'm a word nerd. So I took 3 years of Latin in high school and, we read a lot of the classics in the original. And I always like to know where words come from originally. And so I spend all my professional time with scientists. Ironic since I'm not a scientist, but they're my people in a lot of ways, but it's a separate story. Anyway, so I was like, where does the word scientist come from? I learned that it's a relatively new word. It was like coined in the 1820s or 30s. And it was the combination of two things. It was the Latin word for knowledge, which you may know is scientia. And then the creator of the word took the IST from artist and put scientia in the IST together and got scientist.
Oh,
So what I say to scientists is, you are knowledge artists. And this artistry, which I define as communication and these kind of essential skills interacting with other people, that's baked into your job description. It's not a separate thing. it's part of who you are professionally, and just get more in touch with that, and I can help you do that. I love how you mentioned that, and you post a lot about performance reviews, and you've been really frank about discussing areas for your own personal development. You just told the story right now. Most people don't do that, particularly really sharp, smart people. They just think it's part of my brand to know everything. It's reinforced by the culture where I work that people are hesitant to admit they don't know something. Maybe that happens more in the early parts of your career. You've taken a different approach, and I think that's awesome. And so I wanted to ask you, where do you think that fearlessness, if you want to define it like that, or you can
Mm.
describe it
Mhm.
any way you want, where do you think that comes from? And just talk a little bit more about that. It's really unique.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to say on your previous point about the artist, I totally agree. And I think that's how I view being an engineer as well. It's your job is to solve problems and move the business forward, right? Move the business forward. It's not just to sit in a corner and code or something like that. And so I totally agree. And I think I'm going to steal the knowledge artist
Good.
terminology too as well. I'll put a Mark Bayer TM though on it. But on the fearlessness, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned it. And I just did it because I think it comes from a realization that I had where vulnerability is where real human connection comes from and people start to understand you. And I realized that when, so I was in like this classroom, it was right before my first year of university. And we had to share these like stories, sort of things that sort of defined our lives or changed us in certain ways and things like that in a poem format. And so I put together a poem and it was about how my video game addiction shaped my life and my relationship with my dad and things like that. And prior to that point, I viewed myself as this weird introverted kid and people didn't really talk to me that much and they probably didn't really understand me or anything. After I shared that story, people, one, actually partially cried, which was interesting. and and then two, they came up to me for the first time that they never really did. And they would say things like, "Oh, I totally I totally get you now. I understand you that this makes so much sense." And gave me this sense of, oh, I actually fit in now. Now that I just like share more about myself. And it also helped me grow too from a reflection piece. So I think that realization made me a little bit more open to trying to seek those opportunities to just be down to be vulnerable. And I think you see it with one of my recent articles too. It was like 5 lessons learned from 6 years of as a software engineer. And that article, so I post on Reddit every single time my articles, and I get these very, let's call it volatile comments sometimes. Reddit can be Reddit. They can just make their sort of view of the world and just put their assumption on that and make hate comments or whatever, things like that. That one there where I was vulnerable and shared these stories from my past experience, that converted the Reddit trolls. That one, they were posting, they were saying things like, I was ready to go into this hating this. And I actually came out thoroughly enjoying it, like things like that. And so it just shows you like the power of being down to just put yourself out there and be vulnerable. So yeah, that's where it comes from.
Love it. So cool. Human, be human. I want to shift a little bit because you're teaching this really highly rated course. You're teaching this really highly rated cohort based course on the Maven course platform called Mid Level to Senior for High Growth Engineers, where you're teaching students to really nail 5 areas and more about how to get to that senior level. And I'm sure some of our listeners would be interested in getting more, learning more about your course and where to register.
Yeah. So I have some good news and bad news here. The good news is that the course is Yeah, I did 2 cohorts. It went great. I really love everything that's in it, and that is why I am going to make it a digitally available course. Anyone can just get it and watch it on their own time. Right now, it was a cohort course, so you had to be there at a specific time, and I decided to just put that on hold for a little bit. I would get a lot of emails, say, "Oh, I can't attend the time," things like that. So I wanna just make it digitally available for everyone. So if you wanna be notified about that, then I would just say to subscribe to my newsletter because I make all announcements there, High Growth Engineer Newsletter. If you search that, it should come up. You can search for the course on Maven as the course platform, and you'll get on a wait list, and I might do a cohort one later, but I would say subscribe to my newsletter, and I'll let you know that the digital one is available.
Great. Yep. And we'll have the link to the newsletter and the show notes for this episode. Jordan, as we wrap up, I want to ask you what your favorite thing is about being an engineer, and then also what your favorite thing is about being a writer.
Yeah, for the engineer one, I think the favorite thing there is that there is so much that you can grow in, and if you envision yourself as like a in a video game, like a video game player, and you have all these different skills, right? Some is maybe algorithms or something like that. Another is your algebra or communication, presenting, demos, writing performance reviews, managing up, all those things. There's so much to it. And you can just essentially grow in all those different areas. And I like how you can see the impact of you growing almost instantly a lot of the time, right? It could be like a new coding skill that you just learn and you realize, oh man, I wish I knew this 5 years ago. And now you start using it like every day or something like that. So yeah, just I think the constant growth aspect of it. And then the writing side, I think it's similar. I would say that taking that analogy one step further, if you have all these skills that you're trying to level up in, writing is the one that kind of moves a lot of them forward all at the same time. If you work out, you can do like a bicep curl and it only works out your bicep. Or like you could do like a bench press or work your arms, your triceps, all those things. Like writing is like that essentially because you get better at like communicating your ideas. You get better at learning the thing that you're writing about. Like you retain it better. You build a network of people that you can talk to and people that look up to you. And that leads to more career advancement, more opportunities just in general. And I can talk about like those opportunities it's led to. But yeah, just a ton of things that you grow in from writing. So I would recommend it to anyone, even if they don't want to write publicly. I would say write publicly, learn in public is one of the best things that you could do. Even just doing a daily reflection and talking about writing maybe something you learned or something like that, I think will help you a lot.
Such a actionable, rich conversation, Jordan. So many good insights, and thank you for sharing professionally, personally with our listeners. I know that listeners are going to get a lot of value and really enjoy this episode. Jordan Cutler, author of High Growth Engineer newsletter, 50,000 plus and counting subscribers. You'll see a link to how you can join the subscriber list in the show notes. Also, of course, senior software engineer. And I don't know how you have time for all this, Jordan. That was going to be one of my questions. Course instructor. Yeah, there's maybe something else in there that I didn't, capture. But in any case, I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing and you took time out to come on the show.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Listeners, thanks for being here on this episode of When Science Speaks, and I hope you'll be back next time for the next episode of When Science Speaks.